You're walking down a narrow cobblestone lane in a medieval town, perhaps London, perhaps Paris. The street thrums with life, saturated with the mingled aromas of sizzling fat, sweet ale, and something vaguely fishy that could be either the nearby stall or the open sewer trickling along the roadside. Either way, it's a scent you've grown accustomed to. Shouts echo from every direction as vendors hawk their wares in rhythmic, almost chant-like calls. Children dart between carts, and a man in a faded tunic chases a chicken that clearly has no interest in becoming dinner. This is your medieval food court. The entire city functions as an open-air restaurant, with no drive-thrus, no glowing menu boards, but plenty of food. Some of it even hot. Around the next corner, a woman stands behind a makeshift cart of scavenged timber lashed together with rope. She stirs a steaming cauldron that smells surprisingly decent. Onion, barley, maybe a few root vegetables, if fortune favors you. No meat today, unless you count the faint trace of marrow clinging to a bone bobbing in the broth. The stew is thick, goopy, served in a shallow wooden bowl or straight into your cupped hands if you're poor enough. Bread accompanies everything: round loaves, flat rolls, or, more likely, dense hunks of coarse black bread. You tear off a piece, dip it into the stew, and chew. It's filling, warm, and costs only a single small coin. You don't sit down. This isn't food for lingering. It's survival-grade cuisine, meant to keep you moving, working, enduring one more day. For most people in this time, there's no hearth at home, no personal kitchen. Fuel and time are luxuries, so street food becomes the default. Further along, a grizzled vendor with half a beard roasts skewers of something vaguely meat-like over a smoldering pit. It might be pork or goat, but you fervently hope it's not cat, though the line of eager customers suggests it doesn't matter much either way. He slathers each skewer with a sauce from a jug that may once have held wine. You could ask questions, but in this world, curiosity rarely pays off. Eating in public isn't frowned upon, it's simply the way of life. Rich and poor, merchant and pilgrim, monk and laborer all eat in the streets. Marketplaces double as bustling food courts. Alleyways become impromptu dining halls. Records from as early as the 12th century mention open-air cookshops in cities like London and York. These stalls had no logos or slogans, but they built reputations. If a vendor served rat instead of rabbit or made patrons sick, word spread faster than a grease fire. One curious custom: bread often served as a plate, called trenches. These thick, stale slices held stew or meat. After the meal, you ate the bread, efficient, though medieval loaves could be so hard they might double as roofing tiles. Cleanup wasn't a concern. You pause at a stall selling pies, not sweet desserts, but hearty meat pies with thick, hand-sized crusts, perfect for eating on the go. The filling might be spiced beef or a murky blend of offal and oats. You buy one. The crust is flaky, the interior hot, oily, and full of mystery. That chewy bit, best not to dwell on it. It fills you, it suffices. You duck into a shadowed corner near a cooper's workshop and watch the city's culinary theater unfold. A monk haggles over fish. A woman balances a stew pot on her head. A child snatches a boiled egg from an inattentive vendor. It's chaotic, yet functional. Historians still debate how regulated this street food economy truly was. Some argue cities enforced strict rules about vendors, while others claim enforcement was sporadic at best, especially beyond major markets or feast days. Either way, you're not alone in rolling the dice on your digestive system. You finish your pie and wash it down with a mug of weak ale, safer than water, cheaper than wine. It's lukewarm, faintly sour, but quenches your thirst. The streets grow louder as more vendors arrive, layering the air with new scents. You feel full, perhaps slightly uneasy maybe, from something extra in the stew, or simply from flavors your modern palate wasn't built for. Congratulations, you've survived your first encounter with medieval fast food. Leaving the alley stalls behind, you turn onto a wider lane scented more with spilled ale and charred meat than fish and onions. The crowd here is different, not dashing after chickens or hawking vegetables, but settling in to eat. This is tavern territory. You push open a heavy wooden door into a low-beamed room, alive with chatter, clinking tankards, and the occasional earth-shaking belch. The floor is hard-packed earth, worn smooth by generations of boots. Flickering tallow candles cast more shadow than light, and smoke curls upward through a hole in the ceiling, more gap than chimney. This is the closest thing to a proper restaurant you'll find, a place to sit, eat hot food quickly, and be back on the road within the hour. It's fast, communal, and hygiene is an afterthought. You take a bench at a long table already occupied by wool-clad laborers, devouring thick porridge and glistening sausage. There are no menus, just whatever the cook managed to assemble that morning. The tavern keeper, grease-streaked and weary, grunts something about salt pork and leeks when you ask for food. You nod. That's the deal. Meals are based on what's available, affordable, and not yet visibly spoiled. If you're lucky, there's seasoning. If not, it's yesterday's leftovers warmed up. Your plate arrives, boiled salt pork swimming in leek broth, beside a slab of barley bread tough enough to last a week. It's salty, earthy, heavy, rustic, satisfying, and undeniably filling. Around you, the room pulses. Merchants argue over dried cod prices. Travelers share a silent bowl of beans and cheese. Even a priest or two lingers over meat, pretending not to enjoy it. Taverns are great equalizers. If you have coin, you eat. Nobles might claim a quieter corner or rent an upstairs room, but the stew comes from the same pot. In university towns like Paris or Florence, these places buzz not just with gossip, but with political debates and whispered lines of Latin verse over mugs of ale. Many taverns were legally required to serve food with drink. Authorities hoped a full belly might keep patrons from drinking themselves into oblivion. Whether it worked is debatable, but taverns also offered takeout. You could pour your stew into a clay pot or wrap it in bread and leave, avoiding onion-scented minstrels and rowdy company. Outside the tavern door, a woman sells cold pies and hard cheese to those avoiding the crowd. The tavern keeper tolerates her. Maybe she's family, maybe she pays in dairy. These informal arrangements are the backbone of street commerce. Reputation is everything. Medieval Yelp is simply remembering which vendor hasn't poisoned you yet. Scholars still argue whether taverns served more locals or travelers. Some say they catered to the latter, clustered near city gates and crossroads. Others claim they were neighborhood fixtures, part pub, part kitchen. Either way, you're here now, and your hunger has quieted. You notice no one uses forks. Knives and fingers do the work. Spoons appear only for soup. Forks are still exotic, even suspect some, consider them effeminate or morally dubious. So you follow suit, tearing meat and sopping broth like everyone else. Your tankard is empty. The room has grown louder. Someone shouts about taxes. A dog barks at a fallen carrot hand. You decide it's time to go. You wipe your hands on your tunic, no napkins, of course, and step back into the street. The sun hangs low. The stew carts are gone, replaced by vendors selling roasted nuts, chestnuts, baked apples, light fare for evening wanderers. But your journey isn't over. The golden light softens, and a new aroma stops you cold, something flaky, peppery, intoxicating. Then you see him, the pie man. His cart, blackened by years of smoke, balances on 2 wheels and sheer will. A small brazier glows with coals, crowned by hand-sized meat pies with crimped, bubbling edges. This is street-level luxury, the medieval burger stand at rush hour. The pie man grins without looking up, rotating pastries with iron tongs, his hands soot-streaked and calloused. You ask what's inside. Meat, he shrugs. Pressed further, maybe chicken, maybe not. It's the most honest answer of the day. People adore these pies. Portable, hot, self-contained. The crust traps the mess, and the mystery keeps expectations low. Historically, meat pies were ubiquitous across England, France, and the Low Countries. Fillings ranged from spiced pork and eggs to chopped liver, fish, or even Roman habits die hard. The crust, often called a coffin, wasn't always meant to be eaten. Sometimes it served merely as a protective shell, like a medieval takeout container. In fact, many households without ovens would bring raw pies to bakers to be cooked for a fee, turning pie making into a cottage industry. Clever cooks stretched meat with oats or onions, pocketing the savings so long as no one complained. There's even huff paste, a inedible pastry shell designed to preserve pie contents during long journeys. Salt, heat, and an impenetrable crust were the only preservatives needed. You buy a pie. It's scalding hot. The filling is savory, slightly peppery, dotted with grisella, reminder that meat was chopped in haste, not with care. Yet it's satisfying. Oily juice runs down your chin. You've joined a tradition that fed peasants, pilgrims, and poets for centuries, but there was risk. Though pies were baked and hot, making them theoretically safer than raw meat, refrigeration didn't exist, and spoilage was common. Historical records tell of vendors fined for corrupt flesh or even hauled to court when customers fell ill. Justice, like the pies, was often questionable. Still, pie culture thrived. Seasonal varieties abounded. Fish or cheese during Lent, goose for St. Martin's Day, colossal banquet pies that served as centerpieces, some even concealing live birds that burst forth at the first cut, adding theatrical flair to feasts. At another corner, an older woman tends a stone oven built into a crumbling wall. Her pies are smaller, crispy, redolent of onion, herbs, and something aromatic. Her cart is tidy, her movements practiced. She's likely been at this for decades. Street cooking was often women's work, widows' wives, those patching together a livelihood. You admire her craft. She offers you a fresh pie on the house. The crust flakes delicately dusted with fennel and pepper. The filling remains a mystery, but tastes cleaner, brighter. You nod, mouth full. She returns the gesture. No words are needed, just mutual respect between two souls bound by pastry. As dusk deepens, more pie carts appear. Evening brings workers heading home, children on errands, late arriving travelers. Demand surges. Pie men work with rhythmic precision, shouting, flipping, feeding fresh batches to the coals. This is prime time, and you, belly full and fingers greasy, are part of its rhythm. You finish the last bite, toss the inedible crust to a passing dog who sniffs it, gives you a reproachful look, and trots off. Fair enough. Not everyone appreciates huff paste, but you're starting to. Medieval fast food may lack golden arches, but it offers golden crusts, smoky corners, and a charm only slightly dubious meat can provide. You drift toward the marketplace's edge, where stalls thin and the air sharpens with oil, smoke, and brine. Fried fish. It's Friday, meatless day in the medieval Christian world, and fish is not only permitted but celebrated. Theological loopholes made it non-flesh, and that opened the door to one of the era's most beloved street foods. You follow your nose to a rickety cart beside a basin of eels, carp, and suspiciously still trout. A sharp-eyed woman in flour-dusted sleeves slices fillets with lightning speed and drops them into bubbling oil. The pan, blackened and wide, sits over a brick hearth fueled by scrap wood. Her batter is simple. Flour, maybe stale ale or wine, herbs to mask any fishy funk which is definitely present. You place a coin on the plank counter and receive a portion wrapped in stale bread. It's hot, oily, crisp at the edges. The fish inside is flaky, tender, likely river caught, not cod, but better than another slab of salt pork. You devour it, licking your fingers, keenly aware that soap is a luxury. Fish on Fridays wasn't just piety, was cultural infrastructure. With meat forbidden on Wednesdays, Saturdays, and all of Lent, entire economies revolved around fish. Fishmongers hauled daily catches into cities. Salted herring arrived in barrels from the North Sea. Monasteries bred eels in pits. Shellfish came straight from the shore. While some went to kitchens and abbeys, plenty ended up on carts like this, sizzling in cheap oil, vanishing into hungry mouths. Fried fish wasn't Neuroman's deep-fried smelts centuries earlier, but in cities like London, Bruges, and Venice, the fish fryer became an institution, quick, affordable, and spiritually compliant. You watch the vendor work efficient, wordless. A boy delivers fresh catch and walks off chewing a fish head without hesitation. A woman requests the crispiest one, proving human nature is timeless. Scholars debate how regularly these stalls operated daily in port towns, perhaps only on fasting days inland. Coastal cities dined on fresh fish. Inland, it was smoked, salted, or nearly jerky. You sit on a low wall, watching the quiet ritual unfold. People line up, eat, maybe exchange a few words, then vanish back into the city. No one lingers. This is nourishment with a side of faith. Eat, be grateful, carry on. The vendor works with monastic focus, seconds in oil, a flick of salt, a swift handoff. You're in and out like a penitent from confession at your elbow. An old man mutters about last week's carp that gave him dreams of talking birds. You avoid eye contact. Folklore claimed certain fish had spiritual lore hallucinogenic properties. Saints were said to eat blessed fish that sang scripture. You hope your meal grants nothing stronger than a nap. Evening prayer bells toll. The vendor douses her coals, sending up a plume of steam that smells of burnt garlic and fish scales. You sigh, full and oddly comforted by the simplicity hot food, shared silence, the press of strangers bound by grease and devotion. In another life, you might have stood here every Friday, coin in hand, hoping for the crispiest piece. You rise, wipe your hands on your cloak, and stretch. The market closes, but the streets still hum. A new scent drifts through the air, rich, spicy, unmistakably stewed. You follow it, because in the world of medieval fast food, there's always another bite waiting, just around the corner. The broth's aroma strengthens as you weave deeper into the city, where timber-framed buildings lean close like conspirators. Dusk has cooled the air, but not enough to dispel the warm cloud of simmering soup between the houses. You step around a loose cobblestone, nearly tripping over a disinterested dog, and find it, an iron pot the size of a washtub perched over glowing embers. A vendor stirs slowly with a wooden paddle large enough to double as a weapon. Steam rises in thick waves, garlic leaks, and the deep mineral tang of bones. A line has formed, soot-faced laborers, a lanky boy with hands in his tunic. No one speaks. They stare into the pot as if watching a spell unfold. This is pottage, the backbone of medieval street food. Cheap, scalable, endlessly adaptable. Vegetables, grains, herbs, maybe a scrap of meat if luck allows. Boiled for hours, it becomes a thick, rib-sticking sludge that tastes better than it looks and fills you for a coin or two. Perfect for the hungry, the poor, the hearthless. You hand over a coin. The vendor plunges a ladle into the depths. The liquid clings, heavy and steaming, as it pours into your waiting vessel wooden bowl or waiting palms. You dip your bread, take a bite, and let the warmth settle into your bones. It's not fancy. It's not safe by modern standards, but it's honest. And in this world, that's more than enough. Gravy-like broth sloshes from the ladle and plops into a thick wooden bowl. The vendor drops in a small wedge of dense bread, flecked with what might be barley, or simply the dust of the street stand passes it to you without a word. You nod in silent thanks and step aside, finding a low wall to perch on, cradling the bowl like something precious. The soup steams, thick and promising. You scoop a bite with the bread and taste onion, pepper, and something earthy, parsnips, perhaps. At the bottom, a chewy scrap of gristle, a lucky find. In a dish like this, any trace of protein is a gift. Soup, or pottage, as it was often called, functioned as a great culinary equalizer in the Middle Ages. Lords feasted on versions enriched with meat, spiced with saffron, and served in gilded vessels. But the foundation remained the same. Boil what you have until it melds into one unified mass of comfort. For ordinary folk, pottage wasn't a delicacy, it was survival. Yet, in the hands of a skilled cook, it could be surprisingly delicious. In many towns, enormous communal pots simmered all day, sometimes through the night, fueled by wood scraps and kitchen scraps alike. Vendors simply replenished water and tossed in whatever was on hand, turning the same base broth into something subtly new with each passing hour. Some pots went days or even weeks without ever being washed. Why clean what never stops cooking? This practice even had a name: perpetual stewer, forever soup, continuously topped off, never emptied. Historical accounts speak of pots maintained for decades, a slow accumulation of generations, ingredients, and hunger. Romantic, perhaps, utterly unhygienic, without question. But in a world without refrigeration, constant heat offered the best shield against spoilage. You glance around and notice how people eat. Few have spoons, unless they've brought their own. Most scoop broth with bread or sip directly from the bowl. An old man slurps loudly, smacking his lips as if seated at a royal banquet. It's not about manners. It's about getting warm, fed, and back to work before the next bell tolls. Behind the stall, another pot sits covered by cloth. This one smells richer, deeper. Perhaps a special batch for wealthier patrons, or just a thicker reserve held back for later. A young girl sneaks a peek inside while the vendor is distracted and gets a gentle swat away. You don't blame her. The lure of meat is powerful. Not all pottage was alike. Some versions featured beans or lettuce. Others used beer for depth. Spelt or rye might be added for thickness. On feast days, chopped bacon or chicken might appear. On fasting days mandated by the church, it would be fish or plain vegetables. Quality always depended on the cook and their larder. A gifted soup vendor could earn a loyal following not through signs or slogans, but through flavor alone. In the 1300s, word of mouth was the only Michelin guide that mattered. Historians still debate whether these vendors operated under official license or merely tolerated presence. Some cities imposed strict regulations. Others looked the other way, so long as no one collapsed in the street. The church occasionally ran charity kitchens, offering free pottage to the destitute, though such efforts were inconsistent. For most, the best meal came not from institutions, but from a stranger with a large pot and a keen sense for balance. You finish your bowl, licking the last traces from its rim, as everyone else does. It's not gourmet, but it's deeply satisfying comfort in its purest, most essential form. As you return the bowl, something tender catches your eye, a quiet gratitude shared among the eaters. No shoving, no shouting, just warm faces, empty bowls, and the quiet relief of hunger replaced by warmth. The vendor nods, already ladling for the next customer. The fire crackles, the pot bubbles. In this corner of the world, life is held together by broth and bread. You stand and move on, wiping your hands on your tunic again, for there are no napkins. The streets are cooling, lanterns flickering to life in upper windows. Yet the city doesn't sleep. Somewhere, ale is being poured, onions sliced, coals stoked. Wherever there are people, there is hunger, and someone clever enough to meet it with a ladle and a bowl. Your steps lead you back toward the market's edge. But this time you follow sound rather than scent. The clink of mugs, rumbling laughter, and a tune sung slightly off-key by those who've had more than their share. Around the corner, you find them mail stalls, haphazardly assembled, each lit by a single torch sputtering in the wind. This is the medieval version of a liquid lunch. These stalls are modest wooden counters, propped on sawhorse legs, shaded by flapping canvas. Barrels cluster behind them, some tapped with wooden spouts, others being rolled or hefted with grunts of effort by wide-armed women in aprons that carry more history than hygiene. Their movements are swift. A coin slapped down, a mug filled with amber liquid, the next customer already waiting before the last has taken a sip. This isn't refined drinking. It's hydration, warmth, calories, and, perhaps, a measure of courage. You join the line behind a man who smells of horses and fiscia. Strange but oddly authentic blend. When it's your turn, the alewife doesn't ask. She fills a ceramic tankard from the nearest barrel and slides it over. It sloshes, warm and foamy, with the sour tang unique to medieval ale. You sip. It hits like liquid bread, herbal, earthy, faintly reminiscent of rainwater. Hops haven't yet taken hold. Instead, bitterness comes from Groot, a secret blend of herbs and flowers that varies by brewer. Today's tastes of nettle, and something like regret. You drink anyway. Ale was the everyday beverage for most medieval people, not just for pleasure, but necessity. Water was often tainted, drawn from sources polluted by latrines, slaughterhouses, and livestock. Even children drank ale, though a weaker version called small beer, low in alcohol, easy to make, and surprisingly nutritious. You weren't necessarily drinking to get drunk, though it happened. You were drinking to stay alive, and where there's ale, there's food. To your left, a man chews boiled onions wrapped in cabbage leaves. To your right, a woman bites into cold roast tucked inside a dry barley roll. It's not hot cuisine, but it's portable land, crucially absorbent. Ale stalls often offered just enough sustenance to keep you upright. Hard cheese, salted eggs, pickled vegetables, or a chunk of yesterday's stew. You buy a small plate of pickled root sour, slightly rubbery, probably turnips. You chew between sips, the acidity cutting through the ale's mustiness. It's not bad. In fact, it's oddly refreshing. Many of these stalls were run by alewives, women who brewed and sold ale from their homes or carts. Brewing was one of the few trades open to women, especially widows. Some became neighborhood legends for the strength or smoothness of their brew. Reputation was everything. Bad ale meant empty barrels. Of course, not all were scrupulous. Some diluted batches with water. Others reused old mash or skipped boiling altogether. Complaints were common, and cities tried to regulate quality issuing licenses, capping prices, even appointing official ale testers to sample wares. Whether those tasters were vigilant inspectors or just freeloaders remains a scholarly question. Your ale is decent. Stronger than small beer, but not enough to make the cobblestones sway. A pleasant warmth spreads through your belly. Around you, the mood shifts. Laughter grows louder. Someone begins piping a tune near another stall, tapping a foot in a puddle. People sway. A drunk attempts to sing along and fails spectacularly. You sense this isn't just a pit stop, it's a social hub. Deals are struck here. Gossip spreads. Lovers meet. Arguments ignite. You overhear whispers. A merchant cheating on waits. A noblewoman who eats like a peasant. No one shouts, but no one holds back. Ale loosens tongues as much as it soothes souls. These stalls don't display licenses or health scores. They survive on reputation and rhythm. Serve too many bad drinks, and your regulars vanisher barrels mysteriously empty. Your stall overturned. It's fast food with stakes far higher than online reviews. Some vendors faced public shaming, pillories, fines, even dunking in rivers to cleanse their trade. You finish your tankard and return ETS mugs, are reused, rinsed if you're lucky, passed endlessly from hand to hand. You try not to wonder who drank from it last. The alewife takes it with a nod and turns to the next customer. Night deepens. Stalls begin packing up barrels, rolled away, canvas folded, coals smothered. You walk on, head buzzing, stomach full of sour ale and dubious vegetables. It wasn't fancy. It certainly wasn't clean, but it was fast, satisfying and, if you ignore the lingering taste of turnip brine, even enjoyable. You feel you've earned the right to scoff at anyone calling a warm pint at a chain pub authentic. You've had the real thing, served in a cracked mug by a woman who likely brews better than half the craft breweries in your hometown. You turn another corner and catch a new scent, smoky, charred, rich with grease. Your stomach, though full, stirs again, because, in the medieval city, there's no such thing as one dinner. There's always another bite, another stall, another flavor waiting in the shadows. You drift along lamplit alleys, drawn by the sizzle of something unmistakably meaty and slightly blackened. The daylight crowd has vanished, replaced by a livelier, looser assembly, apprentices with ale-bright eyes, cloaked figures casting furtive glances, girls with flower-crowned braids, a man reciting poetry to no one in particular. Welcome to the medieval night market where propriety retires early and late-night hunger rules. The stalls here are rougher, louder. Drunk laborers pass a skewer of what might be kidneys, like a sacred relic. A boy squats near a cart, blowing steam from a roasted apple too hot to chew. Ahead, sausages crackle on a wire rack over open flame, fat spitting as it hits the coals. This is where street food's true magic unfolds after dark, when respectable kitchens shutter, yet workers, wanderers, and revelers still crave something hot and greasy. Vendors know this. They've saved choice items for the night, things too messy, spicy, or frowned upon for daylight trade. After hours, the rules bend. Salt, heat, and meat take center stage. You stop at a grill where a burly man with a wild beard flips patties of ground meat onto an iron plate. You ask what it is. He grunts. Or maybe you don't press further. The scent is intoxicating, smoky, garlicky, threaded with thyme and charred fat. He slaps the patty between two dense bread halves, adds a smear of something pickled, and hands it over. You bite in, crispy outside, tender within, chewy, in a way that raises questions, but not enough to stop eating. It's rich, greasy, deeply satisfying after a day of walking and questionable broth. This is medieval fast food in full revelry, a gut bomb with soul. Around you, the market thrums with unbuttoned energy. Minstrels bicker over performance order. A vendor sells tiny cakes soaked in honey and ale. A woman balances 3 bowls of pottage while soothing a crying toddler. Behind you, a couple kisses like they're in a tragedy. Everyone is louder, sweatier, hungrier, strangely enough. Medieval cities had curfews, bells rang to signal when citizens should retreat behind bolted doors. But these stalls often ignored them. Many operated late, near brothels, churches, or inns where business never truly ended. For every official curfew, an unofficial feast simmered in the shadows. The link between late-night food and other nocturnal pursuits was hardly subtle. Stalls clustered near gambling dens, alehouses, and bordellos, offering warm meals to those who couldn't or wouldn't explain why they were out past midnight. Stew for sinners, roast chicken for the exhausted, always ale. You pause at a cart selling spiced lamb sticks, according to the vendor. They're dark, crispy, dusted with a red powder that stings your nose. You buy one, of course you do. The first bite hits like peppered fire. Your mouth numbs, eyes water, and you love every second. Nearby, 3 others cough and laugh through the same ordeal, united by pain and poor judgment. It's in these night stalls that quiet innovation thrives. Daytime leftovers become evening stew. Bones are charred for depth. Spices are used boldly when available. No one asks questions. The result? Meals often bolder, messier, and more flavorful than anything served before sunset. There's chaos in the cooking, a hint of rebellion. It tastes extraordinary. During festivals or saints' feast days, some stalls stayed open nearly around the clock, catering to pilgrims, partiers, and philosophizing drunks flooding the streets. Historical accounts even describe vendors fighting over prime nighttime spots near church doors, tavern entrances, city gates where foot traffic guaranteed sales. Competition never slept. You wipe your mouth on your sleeve again, no napkins, and inhale the smoky air. You're greasy, slightly buzzed, and have consumed at least 3 items of uncertain origin, but you feel alive, not in the wholesome fresh air sense, but in the raw, I just ate something possibly unlawful and I'd do it again kind of way. There's something honest about these night vendors. They're not here for fame or legacy. They're here because people are hungry and hot, cheap. Fast food is one of humanity's oldest and truest exchanges. 1 coin, 1 bite, 1 fleeting moment of satisfaction. The crowd thins. Some stalls run out of meat and douse their fires. A man snores beneath a cart. The griller who sold you the maybe boar patty gives a final nod and pours water on his coals. Steam billows into the night, smelling of fat, wood, and ash. You walk on. Behind you, the night market fades into shadow, leaving only crumbs and cooling embers. Ahead, lanterns flicker, hinting at the next chapter. Because, as you're learning, the city never truly sleeps. It only changes flavors. You wake the next morning if what passed for rest can be called sleep, mouth dry, cloak reeking of grilled onions, haunted by a half memory of arguing whether your midnight snack was pigeon or rabbit. Spoiler, it was neither. But there's no time to dwell. The city stirs again, and so do its vendors, now facing a new force, the guilds. You re-enter the marketplace, but something's different. It's not clean, let's not imagine that, but organized. Carts are evenly spaced. Crude signs depict symbols for the illiterate: a fish, a loaf, crossed knife and spoon. Each vendor wears a small cloth pinned to their tunic, red, blue, all marked as official. You've wandered into the regulated realm of guild-approved street food, where every pie, loaf, and ladle of broth is technically overseen by someone in a robe with a quill. Guilds were medieval quality control. Sell bread. You answered to the Baker's Guild. Serve hot food. Likely the cooks, or, in some cities, the oddly specific Pie Makers Guild. Medieval cities were obsessed with regulating trades, especially those feeding people too poor to sue. You stop at a stall bearing a wooden sign reading in wobbly Latin, Pistorum, Lincia licensed by the Bakers' Guild. The vendor has suspiciously clean fingernails and a scale beside his bread. He weighs your loaf before handing it over. You bite in soft, white, chewy, remarkably plain. That's the point. Guild food isn't about surprise, it's about consistency. Bread must weigh a set amount. Pies must contain verified meat. Pottage can't include forbidden offal bits, which, let's admit, are probably the tastiest parts. Rules were enforced with surprising severity. A baker shorting loaves might be paraded through town with his failed breads hung around his neck or, worse, locked in the stocks while pigeons do their worst. Yet guilds also trained apprentices, enforced minimal standards, a relative term, and shielded customers from total chaos. In an age when a bad pie could kill, the guild mark offered a sliver of reassurance. You might not know what you were eating, but it probably wouldn't scream when you bit into it. Scholars debate how much real power these guilds held. Some argue they were ceremonial by the late Middle Ages, with true authority resting in city councils or corrupt inspectors bribed with a skewer and a wink. Others insist they tightly controlled quality, especially during famines. As with most things medieval, the truth likely depended on the city, the season, and whether the inspector had eaten that morning. You move to a pie stand, yes, another one. It's still the Middle Ages. The vendor wears a blue guild pin and slices her pies with surgical precision, clearly trained in the exact ratio of rabbit to filling. You take a bite, good, safe, slightly bland. You almost miss last night's rogue lambstick near the market's edge. Unofficial carts huddle in licensed, likely illegal. Their owners glance nervously, ready to bolt at the sight of a watchman. Their food smells bolder, more garlic, more herbs, more risk. One cart grills something sizzling that might be liver. You watch a woman buy a skewer, devour it in 2 bites, and wipe her mouth with her sleeve. Her grin says she doesn't care about legality. And that's the unspoken truth. Guild food is safe, but soulless. Real flavor lives outside the lines in the hands of those too poor for membership or too defiant to comply. Some are ex-guild members, kicked out for violations. Others are travelers or migrants without papers, such as they were. Many are just desperate souls, hoping to sell enough stew to survive the week. You return to the main thoroughfare, where licensed vendors ladle soups and something called peas pudding, which is somehow worse than it sounds. You try a bowl, thick, gluey, beige. It tastes like someone turned tedium into sustenance, but it fills you. And that's the point. Medieval fast food wasn't meant to thrill, it was meant to sustain. Guild-approved meals delivered calories, not adventures. They served laborers who couldn't risk a gamble with their guts, people who needed to return to hauling barrels, splitting logs, or cleaning privies. You finish your pudding, give a polite nod, and wander off. Behind you, a city watchman eyes the rule breakers on the market's fringe. One cart creaks away into an alley. Another vendor stands firm, frying cheese that sends an irresistible aroma your way. You consider chasing it, but not yet. For now, you've tasted the order beneath the chaos, the system that structures the skewers, standardizes the stew. Comforting, yes, but you already miss the garlic, the grease, the thrill of not knowing whether your next bite will be sublime or a felony. The alley you slip into next is narrower, dimmer, and somehow louder than the streets you've left. Voices echo off stones, some merry, some angry, one unmistakably scolding a chicken. Then the smell hits, sour ale, old onions, something burnt. You've entered the unregulated underbelly of medieval street food where fast food isn't just sold, it's hustled. Here, carts operate without guild sanction, beyond inspector's sight, and sometimes beyond decency. It's messy, chaotic, canned, if you know where to look, where the best food hides. But not all vendors play fair. You stop before a cart that seems legitimate, neat stacks of steaming meat pies in a woven basket. The vendor, a man with a wide smile and teeth like shattered tombstones, hails you loudly. Fresh venison. Venison is noble, expensive, hunted, not something peasants eat. Suspicion flares, but hunger wins. You pay, bite in hand. It's not venison. It's too fatty, too soft, laced with a barnyard aftertaste. Goat, rat, that chicken from earlier. You chew slowly, trying to convince yourself it's rustic. Around you, other customers frown at their pies. The illusion shatters. Food fraud was common enough in the Middle Ages to warrant specific punishments. Selling bad or fake meat could bring public shaming or worse. But in back alleys, far from inspectors, few complained. Who would you tell? The Bakers' Guild. They'd fine you for patronizing an outlaw. Some cities did enforce justice. London vendors, caught selling spoiled goods, were paraded with their rotting wares around their necks. In 14th century France, one pie seller was found stuffing pastries with dead cats. His punishment, tied to a cart and beaten through the marketplace with his own pizzagrim. Lesson in branding. As you finish your venison and mentally recite digestive prayers, a shout erupts up the street. A crowd gathers around a soup cart. A red-faced vendor with too many rings faces an irate woman holding a bowl of what looks like brown water with a single carrot. She hurls it into the street with dramatic flair. Others join in complaints about reheated stew, fingernails in pottage. The vendor weakly claims his soup was blessed by the bishop's own cook. No one believes him. A watchman arrives, mutters about yet another citation, and moves on. The cart remains, but customers drift away, whispering. In medieval street food, reputation is everything. Without reviews or refunds, word of mouth is swift and merciless. Scam your customers, and your cart becomes firewood. You walk more cautiously now. A bread seller offers a suspiciously light roll. A stew vendor distracts from his pot's odor by loudly praising the queen. A fishmonger insists his eels are barely dead. It's a carnival of confidence tricks and culinary roulette. Yet there's charm in the hustle, the way each vendor sells, not just food, but a story. This pigeon flew from the royal dovecote. This bread shared the bishop's oven. This pie cures melancholy. Exaggeration is half the flavor. Then you spot her on, old woman, at a quiet stall. No crowd, no shouting. Just a bubbling pot and loaves that feel real when you tap them. You buy a bowl. She hands it over, silently. It smells of lentils, garlic, something green and unfamiliar. It's excellent. You realize the best vendors survive not by volume, but by reliability. Another customer nods to her with familiar ease. They've eaten here before. In a world of grifters and gamble pies, trust is the ultimate 5-star review. You finish your stew and smile. You've seen both sides, the danger of rogue carts and the quiet dignity of honest sellers. You wipe your hands on your ruined cloak, rise, and step back into the throng. Ahead, more stalls beckon, more mysteries wrapped in dough, more one-handed meals, more monks tending cooking fires. But now you know, not all food is good food, and not every smile hides honest fare. Still you're hungry, always. Just don't mention the cat pies again. Ever quick, efficient, and always ready to move you eat while walking, while shouting, even while watching a juggler accidentally set his sleeve ablaze. It makes perfect sense that the food mirrors this pace. Every dish is built to be held, handled, and devoured with minimal fuss, though minimal might still mean drips trailing down your wrist, or the constant, resigned wiping of grease onto your already battered cloak. That's just part of the charm. There are no forks, few spoons, and certainly no proper plates, lest you count a shard of bark or someone else's discarded trencher. You grab what looks like a baked turnover from a woman weaving through the crowd, with a tray slung around her neck, hawking her wares like royal relics. Meat and leeks fresh and hot, she calls. You believe her. Your fingertips burn. Through the pastry, the crust holds firm enough to keep its shape, but yields easily to your teeth. Inside, spiced lamb or perhaps mutton steams, alongside tender leeks, rich and savory, perfectly sized for one hand. You don't even slow your stride as you chew, and that's the point. This is the medieval answer to the modern sandwich, not always wrapped in bread, but always designed to be eaten without cutlery. Everywhere you look, one-handed meals abound. Flatbreads smeared with egg and herbs, boiled eggs wrapped in sausage, skewers of grilled cheese tucked into cabbage leaves, sticky fruit pies that leave a sweet residue on every knuckle. Some simply carry a hunk of cold roasted meat in one hand, tearing off bites with their teeth while clutching a tankard in the other. It's functional, fast, and undeniably clever. Trenchers play a key role too. Thick slabs of stale bread used as plates, bowls, and eventually food themselves. You pass a young boy seated on a barrel, gnawing on a crust so hard it looks like he's trying to file down his molars. A smear of beans clings to his chin, his first course. Now, the trencher itself is his second. Efficient, edible, if you're not too fussy about texture. This preference for handheld food wasn't just about speed, it was necessity. Workers had no time for formal meals. Servants couldn't lay out full place settings for every snack. Many homes, especially in poorer districts, didn't even have tables. So the food adapted, the vendors adapted, everyone adapted. Historians still debate how widespread this one-handed eating culture truly was. Some argue it was primarily in urban rhythm, merchants darting between deals, apprentices grabbing bites between errands, travelers ducking under awnings to warm their hands on a meat pie. Others insist it extended into rural life too, especially during harvests or festivals, when everyone needed to eat on the move. Either way, the rule held firm. If you could eat it with one hand, it had value. You pause at another stand, where a vendor sells boiled eggs and salt from a small wooden tray. You buy one, Crack it against your palm, peel it as you walk, sprinkle a pinch of salt between your fingers, and take a bite. In that moment, you feel joined to 1,000 others across countless towns doing the exact same thing. It's that kind of food, universal, timeless, oddly comforting. Nearby, a juggler flips 3 apples and a turnip while singing about a bishop's missing cow. A woman strides past, baby in one arm, fried cake in the other. A group of stonemasons sit on a plank, balanced between 2 barrels, passing a wheel of cheese and laughing about a man named Henry who apparently fell into a privy. You can't help but smile. The food culture here is fast because life itself is fast, not in the modern sense of schedules, but in the raw awareness that time is fleeting. You don't know how many meals you'll get. You don't know what labor awaits. You're not even sure the fish you ate yesterday was fish. So when hot, simple, one-handed food appears, you take it, you eat, you move. There's even a curious detail recorded in old cookbooks and guild notes. Vendors often shaped their meals to fit neatly into pouches, the literal medieval lunchbox. Pies were molded to sit snugly in a satchel. Pressed cakes were made to survive horseback without crumbling. A knight could draw his sword with one hand and his dinner with the other. You stop at a stall selling these pouch-perfect hand pies, triangular parcels stuffed with apples and cheese. You buy one and tuck it into your belt just in case of emergency. Or second lunch. By now the sun is high, the market roaring, and your hand is smeared with flour, onion grease, and salt. But you don't care. You're fed, full, and exactly where you belong. A city too loud for sleep and too hungry to sit still. One hand for your food, one hand for the rest of life. That's the rhythm here. Fast, messy, delicious, sand. You've only just begun. The street widens, sloping toward a stone gate beyond which rooftops and bell towers tangle in the distance. You're not leaving, not yet. Just before the road curves out of sight, a new sound catches you, shouting, singing, a low murmur of Latin you can't decipher, and the unmistakable wail of a flute played with far too much enthusiasm. It's not a tavern this time. It's louder, rowdier, and judging by the apple cores and puddles of spilled ale, considerably messier. You've stumbled into a university quarter. The buildings here lean into one another in that half-timbered, time-honored way that makes you question their structural integrity. Beneath a window, a student dangles a leg while reciting poetry to a cat who couldn't be less interested. A few feet away, a robed figure naps beside a cart piled high with half-eaten loaves. And at the center of it all, a food stand swarmed by the loudest, hungriest, most chaotic assembly of medieval students imaginable. It's midday, and the lunch rush is in full swing. These aren't the silent scholars of quiet libraries. These are young men fresh from lectures on Aristotle, now elbow-deep in shared trays of fried cheese and onion pastries. One second, they're debating theology. The next, they're mocking each other's Latin while cramming food into their mouths. Someone shouts for more ale. Another leans across a stranger's plate to snatch a plum. It's academic gluttony in its purest form. University towns, in the Middle Ages, Loxford, Paris. Bologna were famed not only for scholarship, but for their ability to produce hordes of perpetually hungry, underfed students at all hours. These young men, often from wealthy families, but living like paupers during their studies, craved cheap food and cheaper drink. The vendors here adapted accordingly. You approach the stand cautiously, already noting an overturned bowl and a suspicious puddle you'd rather avoid. The vendor, an older man with sharp eyes, barely flinches as a student smacks into his cart. He slaps a hand pie onto the counter with a thud and barks, "Next." You step up. "What's everyone eating?" "Cheese and leek pasty," he grunts, already grabbing another. "Dried plum tart, but I'm out of tart and the plums." You nod, pay, and take the pasty. It's warm, golden, slightly lopsided. One bite delivers rich, salty cheese and just enough oniony bite to make your eyes water. The crust is sturdy, ideal for walking, talking, or spitting crumbs while arguing about logic. Scholars often lived frugally, relying on street food to bridge lectures and, frequently, brawls. Yes, student riots were common, sparked by food prices, exam results, or the mere suggestion that a professor smelled of turnips. These stalls were ground zero for student life. Some towns even banned students from certain taverns or food carts, claiming such fare lead to moral decays. If a greasy leek pasty and a mug of warm ale could breed heresy. Watching the current crowd, three of whom are drunkenly reenacting Virgil, while pelting a stray dog with bread, you can almost see their point. Historians debate how regulated these university vendors were. Some say they followed the same guild rules as the rest of the city. Others argue student districts were more lax, with unofficial carts springing up wherever young scholars gathered. Either way, the food had to be fast, cheap, and edibly. If edible was sometimes a stretch, you sit on a nearby step to finish your pasty. One student balances a pie on his head while quoting Cicero. Another sleeps face down in a trencher of something that once resembled stew. The vendor keeps working, hands moving like clockwork. Beside you, a student offers a bite of his snack, a greasy fried dough ball filled with mashed figs and honey. It's cloyingly sweet, sticky, and tastes like dessert crossed with folk medicine. He grins and explains it's leftover bakery stock, sold at half price to students, people who, it turns out, know how to stretch a meal. Behind you, a group gathers around a plank laid across two barrels, dividing sausages and eggs with pocket knives, sharing weak wine from a flask, laughing at something in Latin you're better off not understanding. You rise, tossing your pasty repair scrap of parchment into a gutter. The vendor shouts orders. Students eat like they've seen no food in days, which, given their studies, may be true. There's something oddly modern in it all. The messy charm of university life hasn't changed in centuries. Loud debates, chaotic meals, questionable hygiene, and food that straddles the line between snack and stomachache. Only now you're living it with mud on your boots and leek in your teeth. You move on, ducking a flying apple core, stepping over a napping student. Nearby, bells toll, perhaps for lecture, vespers, or simply pie o'clock. The stalls don't care. They'll keep serving handheld meals to scholars, brawlers, and passersby alike. Hunger, like learning, never stops. As the day unfolds, the air's scents shift. The smokiness of roasted meat gives way to something subtler, floral, peppery, warm. You pass a spice merchant's booth, sacks and jars brimming with deep red powders, golden threads, tiny seeds that smell of licorice and fire. He's surrounded by onlookers, not just because he claims his saffron cures melancholy and bad dreams, but because, in a city this hungry, flavor sells. You watch as he pinches saffron into a bubbling pot. The broth turns luminous gold. A nearby boy actually moans. You almost roll your eyes, but you understand. In this world, even fast food has room for luxury. You drift to a small cart wedged between buildings, barely more than a plank on wheels. A flour-dusted woman sells fried meatballs crisp outside, glistening with oil, flecked with spices you can't name. You order one. She serves it on a square of dried bark. The first bite stuns you. Coriander, cumin, maybe cinnamon. The meat is tender, almost sweet, with a heat that lingers. It tastes like it belongs. In a royal kitchenette, it came from a back alley. She gives you a knowing nod and turns to the next customer. This is the quiet truth of medieval street food. The spice trade changed everything. Spices arrived from India, Persia, the Levant, Africa, flowing into Europe like liquid gold by the 12th and 13th centuries. Nobles sprinkled cinnamon on birds and paid fortunes for saffron. But even the poor found ways to use spice not for luxury, but for transformation. A pinch of cloves could turn mystery meat into something desirable. Coriander masked age. Spice was the great equalizer and the great distractor. Some vendors treated spice blends like family heirlooms. A stew seller might add nutmeg to aging mutton. A pie maker might tuck pepper vinegar sauce inside the crust. Each blend was unique, a signature, a secret, a legacy sold with every bite. Of course, spices were expensive, so vendors used just enough to tease the palate, never enough to bankrupt themselves. Some mixed true spices with local substitutes, horseradish for mustard, burnt breadcrumbs for color. It was a delicate dance of flavor, cost, illusion, and honesty. Scholars still argue how accessible spices truly were to the working class. Some say only salt and vinegar were common. Others point to trade hubs like Venice, London, or Bruges, where even street food carried traces of distant lands. Maybe it wasn't every day, but it was possible. And in food history, possibility matters. Around you, others join the flavor revolution. Almond pastries dusted with cinnamon. Fish grilled with ginger and black pepper, seasoned like a king's supper. Children share sticky date balls, rolled in fine white powder, sugar roar, something else. You buy a honey cake from a man with gold-stained fingers, made with rosewater and cloves. He winks. The floral sweetness wraps around you like incense, complex, almost decadent. You pause, cake in hand, watching the spectacle. Vendors shouting, spices sizzling, customers swaying like bees drunk on aroma. It's theater. The color, the scent, the performance, they're all part of the sale. Designed to hook you before your mouth even waters. For a saffron-scented moment, you forget the open sewers, the sun-warmed meat, the lack of refrigeration. All you know is someone figured out how to make a lentil cake tastes like a festival land. You're grateful. You wipe your fingers on your tunic, more napkin than garment at this point, and breathe deeply. The air is thick with spice and smoke. For the first time all day, you're not hungry. You're enchanted. Flavor, it turns out, isn't just for the rich. Not here, not today. Especially when you've got one coin, one hand, and a street full of vendors who know how to turn heat and herbs into a slice of heaven. You slow your pace now, belly full of meatballs, honey cake, and the ghost of clove on your tongue. The city seems to catch its breath between the midday rush and evening's approach. But even in this lull, hidden carts remain less flashy than saffron-glazed pastries, but more intriguing. You find one beneath a faded awning, patched so often it's more thread than cloth. Behind a wooden crate stands a vendor beside a tray of food that looks challenging. Small, blackened coils glisten with oil and vinegar, boneless, gelatinous, unmistakably eel. Next to them, skewers of grayish meat on splintered sticks. No crowd gathers here, no scent of baking bread, just the briny funk of river water, guts, and centuries-old habit. Welcome to the fringe of medieval fast food. Today's livers and other dubious delights. You hesitate. The vendor grins, revealing a single gold tooth. He offers a skewer with the confidence of a man who knows curiosity will win. You pay, lift it warily to your nose, metallic, earthy, odd bite. The texture hits first, firm yet soft, like meat that's surrendered its identity to the flame. Then the taste are fat, liver, or close enough, not terrible. You chew slowly, telling yourself it's nutritious, that people have eaten worse. They have. Awful wasn't fringe, it was survival. For those below the noble class, these were often the only cuts available. Nothing went to waste. If it came from an animal and wasn't bone or horn, it had a destiny. Eels were especially popular not because they were delicious, though some loved them, but because they were everywhere, in rivers, barrels, swamps, rich in fat, easy to preserve, and, thanks to a theological loophole, permissible on fast days. Living in water made them fish. You pick up a coiled eel, stewed in vinegar and herbs. The skin is chewy, the flesh oily and soft. Not amazing, but weirdly satisfying. The vendor watches, amused, as if he's seen this internal battle 1,000 times. You nod, finish it, and surprising yourself, reach for another skewer. Organ meats were common, livers, kidneys, hearts, even brains chopped into pies, grilled, or stuffed into sausages with garlic and herbs. Not for the faint of heart, but beloved by those who couldn't afford waste. Waste was a luxury for kings, there's a half-whispered legend of a medieval fair where a vendor sold blood pudding so flavorful that crowds lined up without asking what was in it. Pig's blood, oats, onions, and mystery bits. It was declared a hit, then banned, for being too successful without oversight. That says everything. Not everyone embraced offal. Some religious groups deemed it unclean. Nobles dismissed it as peasant fare. But monks, soldiers, and laborers cared little for stigma. Food was food. Protein was protein. If it kept you steady and full, origin didn't matter. Scholars debate whether offal dishes were more common in cities where butchers had leftovers, or the countryside where people raised their own animals. Likely, it was both wherever meat was scarce, which was everywhere, all the time. You finish the skewer and drink from a nearby barrel water flavored with lemon peel and mint, probably to mask last week's floaters. You're noticing a pattern. Medieval cooks knew how to disguise culinary compromises. Spices, herbs, vinegar, smoke these, weren't just flavor. They were camouflage, strategy, survival. Back on the street, you spot a boy selling something on a stick that looks suspiciously like a fried rat. You walk on. Your stomach has limits. But nearby, children crunch dried fish tails like crisps, perfectly content. The fringe has its fans. Not everyone wants saffron stew or goose-shaped pastries. Some crave the chew of liver, the slick fat of eel, the char of a kidney kissed too long by flame. For them, these carts deliver. You continue, slightly queasy, but oddly proud. You've eaten the overlooked, the undervalued, the underbelly of the medieval menu. You may not crave eel again soon, but you've earned a silent nod from the market regulars. Because in a world where nothing is wasted, the real question isn't what is it? It's will it make you full? And you've passed more pies than you can count. Today's some sweet, some suspect, some still steaming, and a few of the pies you've seen could easily double as blunt instruments. But now you're drawn to something entirely different. The cart before you isn't shouting about flavor, sizzling dramatically, or perfumed with saffron. In fact, it barely has a scent at all. What catches your eye is how the food is presented, not in bowls or paper-thin wraps, but in what appears to be a loaf of bread, a stale one, to be precise. Trencher, the vendor says, before you can even ask. Keeps your fingers clean, fills your belly twice. You nod, accept the offered slab, and study it. It's a thick, rough disk of old bread, more square than round, dense and brown. A scoop of pottage sits right in its center. The bread's spongy middle has sunk slightly under the stew's weight, but the outer crust remains tough enough to survive rough handling. You lift it carefully, bite into the center, and are met with savory lentils and barley, followed immediately by the dense, chewy bread beneath. It's not elegant. It's not even especially delicious, but it is honest. And more than that, it's ingenious. Trenchers were the medieval solution to the problem of plates, namely, that proper dishes were expensive, fragile, or simply non-existent for most people. Why use pottery when your bowl could be eaten afterward? Or, more commonly, when your plate could double as tomorrow's breakfast? The bread used for trenchers was typically yesterday's bake, dry, heavy, and thick enough to absorb broth without disintegrating. Some were round, others square. Often stacked on boards or cloths, they functioned as literal dinnerware. When you finished your meal, you could chew the trencher yourself, toss it to a dog, or give it away as alms. In noble households, trenchers were sometimes left behind on purpose. Once soaked with meat and gravy, they'd be collected and given to the poor. Leftovers from the Lord's table might feed dozens. But out here on the street, you get the whole package. Hot food served on its own edible vessel. No waste, no cleanup, just carbs layered upon carbs. You find a quietish spot, a low stone wall near a stable, where the scent of horses is only slightly preferable to the lingering aftertaste of the eel you bravely sampled earlier. Settling in with your trencher, you marvel at its efficiency. Every part serves a purpose. Even the crust, once you gnaw through the rock-hard outer layer, is technically edible, though tender would be a generous description. In this world, tenderness isn't the goal. Sustenance is. Fill the belly, fuel the body, keep moving. Some vendors didn't even sell stewth. They specialized in trenchers alone, buying stale bread from bakers and stacking them high, rotating fillings throughout the day, onion and beans in the morning, beef drippings at midday, perhaps salted fish by evening. Sometimes the bread was fresh. Sometimes it was 3 days old, masked with extra vinegar. Either way, it was a marvel of form and function. Curiously, historical records from several large towns revealed that trenchers became so common that laws were enacted specifying how thick they must be, especially in taverns. Too thin, and the bread collapsed under the weight of stew. Too thick, and it was just a loaf with broth dumped on top. Complaints were lodged, letters written, scandals erupted. The politics of bread, it seems, were never trivial. You finish the stew and start gnawing at the edges of the trencher. The broth has softened the center just enough, though the corners still resist like old leather. A passing dog eyes you with hopeful desperation. You toss him a chunk. He devours it without hesitation. Smart dog. Scholars still debate how widespread trenchers truly were. Were they primarily a lower-class adaptation, a tavern staple, or simply a street food workaround? Some argue they appeared at every level of society only. The quality of bread and richness of toppings varied. Others insist they were born of working-class necessity. The evidence is patchy literally, but one thing is clear: trenchers were everywhere. You spot a young couple nearby sharing a trencher topped with what smells like egg and cheese. They're eating it like a rustic pizza, each tearing from opposite sides, trying not to drip on the other. It's oddly romantic in a peasant chic sort of way. Another vendor stacks her trenchers into towers and crowns them with fried apples, cinnamon, and honey. Desert trenchers. A group of children tears them apart, sticky-fingered and squealing with joy. One manages to get honey in his hair. No one seems concerned. Then there's the traveling monk offering pilgrim trenchers. Simple bread with lentils and a whispered blessing. He hands them out for free, murmuring Latin as people pass. You take one, why not? A free meal with spiritual insurance is always a good deal. It's dry but humble, tasting more of virtue than flavor. What's fascinating is how trenchers blur the line between tool and food. They're part utensil, part ingredient, part packaging. In an age before paper wraps, disposable cutlery, or reusable containers, they solved a dozen problems with one stale loaf. Centuries later, the logic still holds. It's essentially the medieval equivalent of a bread bowl, a wrap, and a biodegradable plate-all in one. You lick the last bit of broth from your fingers and stretch, full, in that uniquely medieval way, your jaw aching slightly, your teeth weary, but your stomach calm. You stand, brush off the crumbs, and move on. The street is coming alive again. Evening creeps in, and distant bells toll softly. Somewhere, chestnuts roast, you catch the scent on the breeze. But first, perhaps something to drink. Trenchers are satisfying, yes, but they leave you parched, especially when half the crust is still working its way through your gut like a stone in a sock. You can't help but admire the simplicity. Bread as bowl, a tool that becomes a treat. You smile. Welcome to the future of dining. 13th century style. You follow a new scent, now something toasty and herbal. As the light fades and you slip into a quieter part of town. It's not silent, exactly. Hooves still clatter, carts rustle, voices murmur through narrow alleys, but the chaos of the central market. Here, stone buildings, dominate. Shouting gives way to murmured prayers. A carved wooden cross hangs above a doorway. Somewhere behind thick walls, a bell tolls softer, slower, more solemn. You've wandered into the shadow of a monastery. Monks might not seem like fast food purveyors, draped in rough wool, but that's the trick. Medieval monasteries didn't just pray and copy manuscripts. They fed people, a lot of people, and often they did it quickly, outside the gate. A small group waits beside a low wooden bench where a large cauldron steams over a brick fire. A novice, young, red-faced, sweating beneath his coarse robe, tends the pot with one hand. No money changes hands. No arguments flare. People simply hold out bowls or flat rounds of bread and receive thick lentil stew, sometimes just broth with a few scraps. Monastic charity. Kitchens were the hidden gears of medieval urban life. While merchants sold and taverns profited, monasteries gave. Fast, hot, humble food, not just to the destitute, but to pilgrims, travelers, the sick, and anyone who showed up hungry. For all the church's wealth and corruption, many religious orders took their vows of service seriously. Feeding the poor wasn't charity for show, was salvation in action. You step closer. The novice glances at you, then gestures silently with his ladle. You nod and hand him a wooden bowl you borrowed from a tavern and never returned. Don't worry, everyone does it. He fills it with something beige and bubbling. You find a spot against the wall. Sit cross-legged and dip in. The stew is simple. Lentils, garlic, perhaps a hint of celery or root vegetable. Salted just enough to bring out flavor, but not overwhelm. You chew slowly. It's unadorned, unspiced, but deeply soothing. A meal made without flair, but with care. Around you, silence reigns. An elderly woman eats with her head bowed. A ragged boy slurps from his trencher, wiping his nose on his sleeve between bites. No one discusses ingredients or critiques texture. They're just eating, grateful for something warm and real. Monks followed strict meal schedules and dietary rules, observing fasts and feasts with discipline. But in the charity kitchen, the only requirement was hunger. You didn't need to recite scripture to earn a bowl of barley soup. Just show up. For many travelers, that bowl might be the only meal they'd get all day. Pilgrims heading to Canterbury, Santiago, or local shrines relied on monastic food as much as on saints' blessings. A quick stop could mean bread, stew, and shelter. No coin required. Just a mumbled blessing and a warning not to steal the spoons. A curious historical footnote: some monasteries became so famed for their food that pilgrims came as much for the soup as for the relics. One abbey in the Low Countries was legendary for a cabbage stew so rich and creamy that travelers wrote home calling it divinely hearty and possibly more comforting than the bones of St. Agnes. Take that. Agnes. Not all monastic kitchens were equal. Some churned out watery gruel. Others were remarkably organized, with seasonal menus: fish during Lent, chickpeas and herbs in spring, root vegetables in winter. And always, always bread, so coarse it made your jaw ache, but still bread. Scholars debate how much monasteries influenced local food culture. Some say they simply fed the needy and retreated behind their walls. Others argue their recipes seeped into towns, especially when former novices opened taverns or cook shops with cloister-learned techniques. But as you sip your lentil broth beneath a stone crucifix, one thing is clear. Here, in this town, the monks matter. You finish your bowl and hand it back. The novice gives a tired nod and returns to his pot. His robe is splattered with stew. His hands are cracked. He's been ladling for hours. You resist the urge to speak. This isn't a place for chatter. It's a place where food speaks and silence agrees. Before you leave, you notice a new line forming. People who missed the first serving, or were too proud to join until hunger won. Among them, a woman with a baby on her hip, a shepherd caked in mud. No one is turned away. The monastery looms behind the cart, its doors closed, windows dark. You wonder what the monks inside are eating. Probably the same stew, maybe with a pinch more salt. In many orders, they ate no better than those they served as you walk away. The city's noise returns, metal clanging, vendors shouting about pies again. The monastery fades into the skyline, just another building in a city of smoke and corners. But something in you feels grounded now. Memory of quiet charity, food given without price or pride. It might not be the flashiest meal of your journey, but it lingers the longest. Sometimes the fastest food is the one offered without question. And sometimes the best meal is the one you didn't know you needed. The road pulls you back toward the city's heart where the energy has shifted. Bigger, brighter, louder, bells clang from churches, carts, even children's hands. Music swirls, drums, pipes, a lute being played within an inch of its life. You've stumbled into a medieval festival. Less celebration, more sensory ambush. Crowds swarm the square. Jugglers toss apples with theatrical flair. Dancers stomp on planks over mud. Masked men heckle passersby for coins. A dog walks on its hind legs for scraps. Above, faded streamers flutter in the breeze. But more than noise or motion, what hits you hardest is the smell. Meat. So much meat, smoky, fatty, sweetened with something that smells like burnt sugar and beer. You follow the scent like a divining rod, weaving past revelers in flower crowns and jesters in bells, until you reach its source, a spit nearly as long as a wagon, mounted over a pit radiating heat like a forge, rotating slowly on Eton entire pig, crackling, blistered, golden, dripping fat into the flames below. You join the crowd, eyes wide, stomach making promises your dignity can't keep. A man in a red doublet swings a cleaver with dramatic flair, carving slabs and slapping them onto trenchers. The line moves fast. This is festival food meant to be eaten standing, spilled on your tunic, remembered for years. Your portion arrives, a hunk of roasted pork, blackened at the edges, still steaming, topped with a tangy sauce that makes your eyes water. Alongside a skewer of root vegetables charred to campfire perfection. You bite in and the world quiets. Crisp skin, tender meat, vinegar cutting through fat. This isn't everyday stew. This is celebration. Festivals like this were feasts first, everything else second. Yes, they marked saints' days or harvests, but everyone came for the food. Whole oxen roasted in squares. Fish stews in cauldrons big enough to drown in. Cakes shaped like animals. Jellied meats molded into towers. And ale gods. The ale poured from barrels, taller than peasants. Vendors traveled miles to sell here, bringing their best and weirdest. Competition was fierce. A sausage seller mocks a pie stall's crust as soft as a bishop's handshake. The pie seller retaliates by tossing venison samples like holy relics. It's delicious warfare. You find a quieter corner near a stall selling festival skewers, bite-sized meat, onions, and dried plums roasted over coals. You try one, not from hunger, but because days like this are rare. The meat is sweet, sticky, blisteringly hot, and there are sweets, honey cakes, fried in oil, sold by a woman with cinnamon in her hair and a knowing smile. You buy one, crispy outside, molten within, sugar clinging to your fingers like a second skin. You lick it off without shame. During festivals, cities often relaxed food regulations. Vendors could operate outside guild rules, using ingredients deemed excessive in normal times. For a few days, even peasants ate like nobles until their coin ran out or the meat turned. Some historians speculate festival foods were experimental new recipes tested on crowds. Almond paste swans, pastries filled with forest bird you don't ask. At one stall, teenagers sell laughing cakes made with herbs that tickle the belly. You pass. You've had enough adventure for one day. As you wander, you notice something remarkable. No one is sitting. Everyone eats on their feet, moving, talking, living. Medieval fast food at full volume. Trenchers as plates, skewers as cutlery spills. That's what sleeves are for. You finish your honey cake, brush crumbs from your chin. Your tunic is a glorious, sticky, smoky disaster, but you're grinning. At a festival, food isn't just sustenance, it's theater, celebration, the one time no one cares what's in it, only that it's hot, fast, and makes you feel like a king, if only for a few minutes. You step aside for a woman balancing 3 ale mugs, a child gnawing a sausage longer than his arm, and a monk singing a hymn through a mouthful of pie. It's perfect. You've hardly passed the roasted pig's remains when you notice something new. Not the ever-present smell of bread, not the smoke or minstrel's chants, but a voice, low, firm, practiced, not desperate, but commanding. Pies, fresh and hot. No guessing games. What's inside is what you get. That alone makes you stop. Honesty from a street vendor. Rare. The voice belongs to a woman behind a simple wooden stall. Sleeves rolled, hair tied back with twine. Practical, unbothered, in control. On her counter, rows of perfectly uniform meat pies, edges sealed with care. A small carved symbol tops each. One for pork, one for fish, one for egg and cheese. Behind her, a girl fans coals beneath a brazier. Another kneads dough on a stone slab. You've just met one of the unsung pillars of medieval street food. The female vendor. While taverns and guild kitchens leaned male, the streets, specially alleys, corners, tenements, side stalls belonged to women, widows, wives, daughters, mothers. If a husband died, his wife took over the cart. If a family needed coin, women turned their front rooms into bakeries or pie shops. Often, they were the best cooks, fast, cheap, unapologetic. You ask for a pork pie. She nods, hands you one without looking. It's warm. You bite in flaky crust, savory filling, unmistakably pork. No mystery, no disguise, just honest food. Around you, a quiet rhythm flows. She bakes, the girls prepare, The line moves steadily. No shouting, no antics. Just efficient service. It's calming. And perhaps that's why the line grows. In some towns, women ran entire food districts. Pie women, cake wives, alewives, known by name. Some legendary for roast goose or honey cakes, others feared by rivals. They rarely had guild protection, but they had something better: reputation. A 14th century record from York mentions a woman named Marjorie whose eel pie was so popular, 3 rivals accused her of dishonest magic. Whether she used sorcery or extra pepper is unknown, but she kept her stall. The others stopped selling pies soon after. It wasn't always easy. Too successful, and whispers of witchcraft followed. Too assertive, and city officials took offense. Fines, rules, punishments loomed. Yet they kept working because food doesn't wait for bureaucracy, and neither does a hungry crowd. The girl fanning coals coughs, adjusts the pan with expert hands. She's no apprentice, she's part of the business. The woman calls out, "More fish pies. Ready?" The girl nods, grabs dough, begins shaping. It's a family affair. Many stalls weren't solo acts, they were generational machines. Siblings making dough, daughters grinding spices, mothers managing coins. Fast food wasn't just a meal. It was a livelihood. Recipes whispered between bites, secrets encoded in spice. Historians debate how much freedom these women truly had. Some argue they enjoyed rare economic independence, earning coin, managing stock, negotiating deals. Others say it was survival, not liberation, with profits often claimed by male relatives. Likely, both were true depending on the woman, the city, the year. You buy a second pie marked with a fishbone. Inside, white fish, parsley, vinegar, something tangy, briny, rich, perfect for walking. You nod to the girl as you leave. She doesn't smile, just returns to kneading. Business never stops. Down the lane, another woman, gray-haired, arms like rolling pin slaps, fried flatbreads onto a grill, dusts them with honey and caraway, hands them over in one motion. You buy one. Crisp outside, airy within, sweetness lingering long after the last bite. You sit on a stone step, watching women feed half the city. No fanfare, no boasts, just precision and care. A girl no older than 12 sells bread, rolls 3 for a coin. A young woman walks past with hard-boiled eggs, singing softly beneath the crowd's roar. Suddenly, you realize how invisible this labor is, how essential, constant, overlooked. These aren't grand feasts or flaming spits. This is the everyday, the food that gets you through a morning shift or a night without coin. Made with skill, but no celebration, just hands, heat, and hours. You finish your flatbread stand. The street buzzes. Light turns golden as day softens. Nearby, a bell rings. The pie vendor begins packing up, stacking trays, wrapping dough, gesturing to her girls. They move wordlessly, efficiently. Tomorrow, they'll do it all again. Fast food doesn't rest, especially when it's made by the people holding up half the city with one hand and kneading dough with the other. You walk slower now, belly full, the warmth of pork and honey still in your limbs. Sunlight slants amber across the road, dust floating like flour on a baker's hands. The pace softens. On a quieter side street, a steady line forms outside a bread stall. Simple setup, a long table, baskets of loaves. Behind it, a man with arms like tree trunks and a face carved from bread itself, weathered. On one side, pale, soft white loaves. On the other, dark, cracked, uneven hunks. You join the line. He calls prices in a dull tone. White bread costs twice as much. Most choose the dark. A boy pays 2 coins, receives a brown loaf the size of his head. A man in finer clothes buys white, wrapped in linen like treasure. You're witnessing medieval class in edible form. Bread was the most socially charged food of the age. What you ate, white, rye, barley, oat signaled your place in the world. Nobles ate fine white bread wastel or manchat, made from sifted wheat soft light, a luxury. Everyone else ate black bread, dense, hearty, made from rye, barley, oats. Whatever was available, at the front, you buy one of each. Curiosity tax. The black bread is coarse, nutty, slightly bitter food made to last, not delight. It makes your jaw work, but it's oddly comforting. The white is soft, barely crusted, bland, like someone removed all flavor in exchange for status. It tastes like money, like the absence of need. Bread wasn't just food, it was economics. It reflected crop yields, taxes, baking rights, class laws. In many towns, only certain bakers could make white bread, and only for the elite. Grain was milled finer, flour sifted repeatedly. The poor could buy it, but at the cost of days' wages. Bread riots were real. Bakers caught shorting loaves or using bad grain-faced public shaming fines, even confiscated ovens. Some cities posted bread regulations like commandments, quirky detail. Some employed bread weighers, officials roaming with scales to check loaf weights. Underweight, the baker might be fined, whipped, or forced to give free bread for a week. Justice, 1 crumb at a time. You sit nearby, watching. A servant buys 2 black loaves, wraps them carefully. A man eats white bread slowly, daintily. A beggar holds out his hand. The baker tosses him a heel of brown bread. Not fresh, but enough. Historians debate whether white bread was truly better or just more processed. Some say it was less nutritious. Others claim finer flour was safer, less likely to contain debris or parasites. Either way, it was seen as cleaner, purer, revealing more about how society viewed poverty than about taste. You nibble the black loaf's crust and feel grounded. This bread fights back, makes you earn every bite. But it's real, honest. It sticks to your ribs. You imagine the baker waking before dawn, stoking fire, kneading coarse flour, pulling loaves while the city slept. In the festival square, food was performance. Here, bread is survival, sold daily, eaten hourly, barely noticed, deeply essential. How many lives are measured in crusts? How many debts settled in loaves? You finish your bread, brush crumbs away. The street quiets further. Light turns blue. A woman walks past, basket of loaves balanced on her head. A boy trails, catching crumbs in his hands. Tomorrow, more bread, more lines, more debate over who gets what. But tonight, you've tasted both sides. And hunger, it turns out, doesn't care how refined your flour is. You don't realize how far you've walked until the cobblestones give way to dusty, uneven earth and the city's hum fades, replaced by the clank of armor, snort of horses. low grumble of men who haven't seen a proper bed in weeks. You've reached the Baraksan encampment pressed against the city wall. Soldiers eat with the weariness of those who sleep in shifts and fight with their fingers. And yes, there's food. A line of tired men around a dented cauldron over a fire pit. A grim cook stirs with a ladle long enough to double as a weapon. Behind him, squires scrape something off a flat iron sheet that might once have been pancakes. You approach slowly, no smiles here. These men have the hollow-eyed look of those who know what an arrow sounds like up close. They eat quietly, quickly, almost exclusively with their hands. What's cooking, you ask. A soldier shrugs. Whatever was still salted and didn't smell like feet. Fair. A ladle of thick stew lands in your bowl-dried peas, onions, salted beef so tough it could survive a siege. You're also handed a hard biscuit known unofficially as a toothbreaker. You try to bite it and immediately regret your life choices. Welcome to medieval military rations, fast food on the front lines, where speed, storage, and survival trump taste. Armies couldn't rely on markets. Meals had to be mobile, durable, rotris. Salted meat was king beef, pork, fish rubbed in salt, packed in barrels, lasting weeks or months. Edible only after soaking or stewing. And even then, edible was generous. You dunked the biscuit until it softens. It tastes like boiled cardboard in beef water, but you finish it tanned strangely. Feel better, fed, grounded, closer to understanding the rhythm of those who carry swords for a living. A squire offers a pouch of dried fruit-shriveled apples, slivers of pear. Trade from the last village, he says. Cook threatened to use it in a pie. We saved it. You smile. The sweetness is a rare luxury in this meat-heavy world. Military cooks were part alchemist, part gambler, working with limited tools, no fresh ingredients, open fires in all weather. They stewed everything: dried peas, onions, salted meat, wild herbs, turnips, if available. No spices unless rationed from officer stores. Occasional beer or wine in the pot to tenderize, and they had to do it fast. Soldiers don't wait. Burnt stew, fine, undercooked biscuit. Your jaws problem. Food as fuel and nothing more. A quirky fact. Some 14th century units had portable ovens, tiny clay domes, for baking bread over coals. Rare but prized. Others baked in iron pots or ashes. One record tells of a knight who cooked bacon on his shield. It worked, but he regretted it in battle. Historians debate how organized army food really was. Some say troops scavenged or bought from civilian sutlers who followed campaigns. Others argue large armies had logistics, barrels of grain, salted fish, livestock in tow. Truth likely lies in the muddy middle. If you were lucky, you ate stew. If not, you stole cabbages and hoped the captain didn't notice. You watch a soldier pull a charred onion from the fire, blow on it, eat it like an apple. Another unwraps hard cheese, slices it with a knife still stained from arrow sharpening. Everything here is efficient, reused, stripped to its barest form. A knife is your fork. Bread is your plate. Ale weak, warm, served in dented mugs is your hydration. You're handed one without asking. It smells like barley and regret, but it washes down salt and ash just fine. The camp isn't a dining hall, it's a battlefield in recovery. Armor rests beside empty bowls. Shields lean on benches. A man sharpens his dagger while chewing dried meat with terrifying focus. No one lingers after eating. It's food then gone. Fast food that moves with you, cooked in the same pot once used to boil water for wounds. You hand back the mug. The soldier nods. No thanks, no fuss, just acknowledgement. You move on, past stacked firewood and drying boots. There's something humbling here. No flair, no spices, no festival pies or monk-blessed stew. Just function, salt, fire, survival. In a way, it's the rawest version of fast food you've seen. And while your jaw may never forgive that biscuit, your stomach does be, 'cause even here, in the mud and ash of a barracks kitchen, someone took the time to stir the pot, soak the meat, and hand you a bowl that counts for something. The sun has nearly vanished, melting behind crooked rooftops and the jagged spine of the city wall. You walk through the half-light, shoulders sore, breath visible as a cool mist settles over the cobbles of dusk that turns every shadow into a memory, every footstep into a story, every shadow becomes a warning, every cough a prayer. You're no longer in just any part of town. You've entered a quarter marked by memory, grief. This is plague country. Not the plague in its roaring, bubonic, furino, black swellings, or wailing, but its ghost, its hollowed-out silence, the dent it left in the streets and souls of those who survived. The buildings here lean harder, as if worn down by sorrow. Doors stay shut longer. On one wall, a faded X remains chalked, washed away, chalked again over the years. Maybe it's symbolic now, maybe it's not. But one thing is certain. The Black Death changed everything, especially how people ate. And street food, already precarious, adapted fiercely to survive. You step into a square that seems to breathe with hesitation. A few carts are set up, spaced farther apart than usual. Each vendor keeps a bucket of water beside their stall, holy water, perhaps, or just plain water blessed by hope and herbs. A woman in a faded headscarf dips a rag into it and wipes her counter after every serving, her hands moving automatically, as if the motion were etched into her bones. You approach and ask for a bowl of whatever she's making. Cabbage and vinegar, she says. Boiled 3 times. You nod. She ladles it into a clay bowl, careful not to touch the rim. The smell is sharp, sour, strangely cleansing. This is what street food looked like after the plague. Cautious, pared down, obsessively boiled, soaked in vinegar like a pickling shed had exploded. Fear lingered long after the rats fled, fear of meat, of touch, of anything not cooked, until it confessed every secret. Vinegar became both culinary staple and cultural shield. People soaked vegetables in it, scrubbed bowls with it, even stirred it into soups to kill what they couldn't see. The logic was simple. If vinegar could strip rust from a knife, surely it could stop a fever. So your cabbage stew tastes like a salad that went to war. But you eat it anyway, grateful for warmth around you. Food is handled like sacred relic. Another vendor hands out bread, already torn into pieces, so no one must touch it. A third stirs a pot wearing gloves, cooking leeks and onions until they nearly vanish into the broth. Everything carries the faint scent of protective herbs, rosemary, sage, sometimes lavender, not for flavor, but for defense. People believed fragrant herbs warded off miasma. the bad air that carried disease. A curious detail during outbreaks. Some vendors wore cloth masks over nose and mouth, often soaked in wine or rosewater. One record from Avignon tells of a cook shop requiring staff to pin sprigs of thyme to their clothes for the defense of the body and public trust. Not quite PPE, but the medieval equivalent. Every dish here is boiled. Boiled meat, boiled greens, boiled porridge, roasting, unthinkable. Raw food out of the question. Even bread is recooked in broth to be deemed safe. You buy a spoonful of lentils, stewed with garlic and vinegar, served over soggy rye. It's mushy, sour, slightly burnt. You finish it all. The plague didn't just kill people, it gutted the food economy. Entire districts of bakers, brewers, butchers vanished. With fewer hands to prepare, fewer mouths to feed, and fewer coins to spend, the supply chain collapsed. Vendors became scavengers and strategists, stretching flour with crushed beans, making sausages from bread and blood, selling soup so thin it was more prayer than meal. Yet the stalls stayed open, shaky, cautious, but open. The fire never went out, even if it burned only on scraps. Scholars still debate whether food safety truly improved post-plague. Some argue fear bred better habits, cleaner stalls, boiled dishes, fewer raw risks. Others say desperation ruled people just needed to believe something could keep death at bay. As always, the truth lives in the gray haze between hope and survival. You stand quietly, bowl in hand, as the vendor wipes her counter again. She nods. In her eyes, you see not just fatigue but the exhaustion of living in a world that knows how quickly everything can unravel. Behind her, a small wooden sign reads, "Clean fire, clean water, clean hands. 3 rules, 3 hopes, maybe 3 lies. It doesn't matter." People still line up. You step away, the taste of vinegar clinging to your mouth like memory. The air grows colder. Your breath clouds. Somewhere in the distance, a dry, rattling cough freezes the street for half a heartbeat. Then life resumes. That's the rhythm now. Pause, flinch, continue. A boy sells bundles of cloves and rose petals tied in cloth. Plague bags, he calls them. Smell this and live. You buy one. It smells like fear trying to become hope. As you walk, you wonder how many were fed in this square during the worst days. How many hands trembled as they accepted a bowl. How many vendors showed up knowing they might die but chose to stir the pot anyway. Fast food didn't stop during the plague. It just boiled deeper. And in that steam was more than hunger, it was survival. The air tonight carries more than cold. It carries rituala, slow humming. Tension that reshapes the day's menu without asking permission. Because tonight is not just any night, it's Friday. And not just any Friday, it's deep in Lent. The food stalls feel it like a weight. No meat scent lingers, no bacon, no sausage grease on the cobbles, no glistening pork bones in firelight. Instead, fish, bread, and something herbal necessity dressed as piety. You've entered the realm where fast food and faith collide. In the Middle Ages, religion wasn't a weekend affair. It was the calendar, the law, the unblinking eye watching every meal. When the church said no meat, people listened, some out of devotion, some from fear, many because enforcement was real. Selling meat on a fast day could mean fines, bans, or standing before a bishop with nothing but prayer beads and excuses. So what did fast food look like without meat? You don't have to look far. The first stall offers fish stew-thin cod simmered in broth with leeks and garlic. It smells clean, if timid. You accept a bowl. It's salty, watery, but hot. A comfort, if not a delight. Next. Fried herring, split, breaded in coarse meal, crisped over coals. A man bites in, picks out a bone, keeps chewing. You follow suit. The vinegar glaze bites back sharp, cleansing. This is fast food that answers to heaven. And it wasn't just Fridays. The medieval church mandated over 100 meatless days a year, Lents, 40, Advents, fast, even Wednesdays and Saturdays. Vendors adapted. You spot mock meats, patties of ground almonds, chickpeas, and herbs. You bite in. It tastes like someone read a meat recipe halfway and forgot the rest. But it's warm, filling. A stall in a churchyard sells only fish pies, each crust marked with a cross, both piety and advertisement. This is holy, not ham. You try one. The filling eel and onions is rich, lawful, satisfying. Historians debate whether these restrictions bred culinary creativity or just widespread cheating. Fish disguised as chicken. Eggs declared spiritual food. One noble famously argued beaver tail counted as fish because beavers swam. The church agreed. The beaver, unsurprisingly, did not. You sip ales still permitted on, take in the quiet compliance. No shouting, no ups, just careful observance. One vendor hastily hides a bucket of pork sausages beneath onions. A woman nearby watches, arms crossed, eyes sharp. She says nothing, but her silence promises consequences. Religion structured the food world. Vendors kept dual menus, one for ordinary days, one for holy ones. Taverns prepared Lenten pottage and Advent pies, like ecclesiastical combo meals. You find a baker selling herb-stuffed rolls. No lard, he swears, only olive oil. Expensive, but acceptable. He hands one over with solemn gravity, as if it passed spiritual inspection. It's savory, aromatic, deeply satisfying. It strikes you. Here you can't separate hunger from holiness. What you eat and when might shape your soul's fate. That's a heavy burden for a fried herring to carry. A child sells pickled eggs, a note pinned to her tunic, approved by Father Mattia. She looks too tired to lie. You buy one. Sour, firm, oddly comforting. Even street food takes on ritual during fasts. Vendors recite ingredients like scripture. Crosses mark pies. Herbs are blessed before boiling. Dinner blurs into devotion. You finish your egg and tuck the shell into a wall, crack joining dozens of others. A small tradition. For luck or just habit, bells toll 3 slow notes. The street thins. Some vendors pack up. Others kneel beside their stalls to pray. The air grows heavier, quieter. In a world where hunger never sleeps, even heaven makes room for a few quick, meatless meals. The city is nearly asleep now. Candles flicker behind shutters, casting halos on wet cobbles. Even the cats, those relentless pie thieves, have vanished into alley crevices. You wander alone, guided only by distant voices and the faint scent of wood smoke. Yet something stirs ahead, a glow, a murmur, a low thrum of quiet life. You follow it, curiosity outweighing hunger, and slip into a covered alley tucked behind taverns. The entrance is hidden behind barrels and broken crates, almost a secret. But inside, warmth greets you, not just from the hearth, but from the people. This is the after-hours cook shop, the medieval late-night dinerware workers, night guards, travelers, and insomniacs gather for one last bowl, one last bite, one last moment of comfort before the long dark settles in. You sit on a worn bench at a shared table. A woman with soot-smudged cheeks hands you a bowl without asking. That's how it works here. No menu, no performance, just what's left and what's hot. Tonight, onion broth. Thin, salty, flecked with herbs. A crust of bread floats in the center, already soggy. You cradle the bowl, sip slowly. It's unremarkably. It loosens the tension in your shoulders for the first time in hours. These cookshops rarely appear in official records. Too humble for chroniclers, too informal for guilds. Some were back kitchens that stayed open. Others were family homes, doubling as soup stalls after curfew. But they were essential. Many city dwellers had no hearths, no pots, no chimneys, no space. Eating out wasn't luxury. It was survival at night, when markets closed and bakers slept. Places like this kept the city breathing. Across from you, a man eats with closed eyes, spooning lentil and beer stew. Beside him, another chews dried meat, while listening to a woman hum a soft tune at the bench's end. No one speaks loudly. No one overstays. This isn't social, it's a quiet pact between the hungry and the weary. Some cities banned cookshops after curfew unless serving guards, monks, or officials. But rules bent when the constable himself came for stew after patrol. You notice how the space functions. One tends the fire. Another pours thin ale. A third ladles broth from a pot deep enough to hide a child. No matching bowls. No tables, just boards over barrels. Strangers eat elbow to elbow, yet with unspoken respect for silence. This is comfort food, not for what it is, but for when and where it finds you. You finish your broth, hand back the bowl. The woman gives a tired smile, not polite, but real. It feels like a blessing. Historians debate these shops' role, precursors to restaurants, extensions of communal living. Either way, they're overlooked yet vital. A young couple enters, damp from mist, baby wrapped to the woman's chest. Without a word, 2 bowls appear before them. The baby stirs. The mother sips. The man rests his head in his hand and breathes like he hasn't all day. This is fast food after dark. No flair, no fire, tricks, just sustenance, handed over in silence. The food equivalent of a warm blanket. Someone leaves a coin on the barrel. The door shuts. Another shuffles in. The bench never cools. The rhythm continues. How many stories have passed through this doorway? Grief, joy, fear, all boiled down into one more spoonful of broth, one more crust of bread. You stretch, body heavy with warmth. You've eaten all day: pies, trenches, stews, fish, mystery meats. But this simple bowl feels the most human, the most timeless. You thank the cook with a nod. She nods back, already refilling another bowl. No names, no tab, just understanding. Outside, mist thickens. The city's sleep-sore pretends to. You pull your cloak tight and walk into the fog, broth still on your tongue, breath ghosting in the cold. Behind you, a kettle boils again. Another bowl fills. Another night carries forward on the back of something warm, fast, and quietly kind. The streets are hushed, every sound amplified. Boots on damp stone, wind between shutters, water dripping from a gutter. You move like a ghost through the sleeping city, the tavern buzz faded. Cook fires cooling days since, now just echoes in corners. But up ahead, past stables and closed gates, a single flicker of firelight persists steady, stubborn, alive. It's a cart, wooden, two-wheeled, once painted, now dulled by soot and grease. Parked under a crooked beam, smoke curling from a brazier in its belly. The vendor doesn't shout. He doesn't need to. The smell speaks, charred, sweet, unmistakably late night. You drift closer. Hot meat pies, but not the neat marked kind. These are sloppy, mismatched, oozing from crusts like they were thrown together in haste. He hands you one without a word. No coins exchanged yet. This is the post-curfew economy. Pay later, or don't. It depends on whether he remembers your face. You bite in recklessly hot. You burn your tongue. No regrets. The crust crumbles. Inside, meat, pork, mutton, sage, onion, salt, glorious, messy, defiant. This is the Moon Marketan unofficial, unlicensed network feeding those who never stop. Bakers on late shifts, guards on patrol, sex workers waiting for dawn, thieves buzzing with adrenaline and hunger. These carts ignored guild rules. They asked no permission. They were nimble, illegal, and essential because hunger doesn't obey laws. And neither does craving. A drunk man beside you orders 2 pies and a skewer of something grilled offal, wrapped in fat, charred at the edges. He pays in buttons. The vendor shrugs, pockets them. Barter, favors IOUs scrawled on strangers' parchment. This economy has its own rules. You order a skewer too. Fatty, smoky, seasoned with mustard seed, probably liver, possibly pigeon. You've learned not to ask after dark. This world was never meant to be polished. Born of need, fed by fatigue, sharpened by risk. Some nights, vendors were chased off, carts seized, food dumped. Other nights, the constable came for stew and gossip. It depended on the moon. Rumors say moon market vendors used secret whistles. 2 notes for safe, 1 for move, 3 for hide the meat. No proof survives, but tavern songs still sing of whistle pie men and midnight stew. This wasn't just trade. It was culture. Scholars debate whether these vendors were desperate survivors or underground innovators experimenting with daring combos no daytime stall would risk. You leave the moon market slowly, walking through mist like someone afraid to wake a sleeping giant. The food lingers in your belly, warm, savory, slightly confusing, but welcome in the deep silence of a city between shifts. Even the drunks have gone quiet. A dog barks once in the distance, then thinks better of it. You round a corner near the city wall and find something almost out of place in the stillness. A baker's oven, still glowing, built into a stone wall, part shop, part home, part neighborhood lifeline. The scent of fresh bread floats on the cold air like a siren song. You thought baking ended hours ago. But this is the baker's hour, the liminal time when the city sleeps and bakers begin. You step closer. The baker, middle-aged, flour-dusted, unsurprised by your presence lifts a hand in greeting. No words. He gestures to a nearby bench, nods toward a tray on a shelf. You sit. The bench is warm from the oven wall. He hands you a roll. No charge. Not tonight. Still hot. Crusty outside, steaming within. Just flour, water, yeast, a whisper of salt. You bite in, and for a moment, nothing else matters. Most medieval fast food depended on people like him, those who worked through the night to make mornings possible. Bakers weren't just bread makers. They were the city's pulse. Their ovens never truly cooled. They served vendors, taverns, monasteries, markets, hospitals, homes. Without them, nothing started, and baking was brutal. Long hours, heavy labor, dangerous ovens, guild rules, punishing light loaves or skimpy flour. Bread laws were no joke. Loaves weighed, prices monitored, ingredients scrutinized. Yet this baker moves with the quiet grace of someone who's shaped dough for 40 years and no longer thinks about it. He scores loaves with a flick, tosses them into baskets, says nothing, but everything about him speaks of rhythm, ritual, quiet purpose. Nearby, an apprentice shovels embers into the oven mouth. His face lit orange, flour smudged on his cheek like war paint. Too young to be tired yet. You notice other things. Hard rolls labeled for the hospital. Oatcakes set aside for the poorhouse. Sweet, raisin-studded buns, likely for a priest or noble. Even in silence, the city flows, and the baker keeps his hands on the wheel. A quirky truth. Bakers often loaned oven space. Many street vendors lacked proper hearths. They'd prepare pies at home and bring them here to bakex, changing coin, bread, stew, or labor. You're watching it now. A woman enters with a tray of small meat pies covered in linen. The apprentice takes them without a word. Habit. Her cart waits in the dark, ready to serve at dawn. Scholars debate how communal these ovens were. Some say tightly controlled. Others cite records of public bakehouses where neighbors rented fire time. In poor districts, the baker's oven often doubled as the neighborhood hearth site of news, gossip, stolen recipes. The baker hands you another roll, darker, maybe rye. You bite in molasses, smoke, still hot. Your fingers are dusted with flour. You feel folded into the night's rhythm. Like dough waiting to rise, the apprentice offers water in a tin mug. Lukewarm, clean. It clears your throat better than ale ever could. You realize you haven't spoken since arriving. It doesn't matter. This space thrives on silence. Eventually, the woman returns for her pies, golden, edges curled from heat. She nods, thanks, and disappears into the fog, footsteps fading. The baker finally speaks. One word, morning. You glance up. The sky lightens gray behind rooftops. Somehow, the night has passed. He shrugs, as if to say, this happens. Returns to shaping dough. The apprentice sweeps flour from the stones. A rooster crows miles away like a curtain-lifting dot. You stand. Thank the baker with a nod. Leave the last crust on the bench. Someone else may need it. The streets stir again. A cart rumbles. A door creaks open. Somewhere, cheese is being sliced. The food world begins anew. But in this corner, where ovens never stopped, the day has already dawned, and it smells like bread. Dawn presses its thumbprint on the city sky, shifting from gray to pearl. light seeping through clouds like a secret. Streets once heavy with sleep now rustle, doors creak, dogs stretch, pigeons flutter on rooftops, eyeing breadcrumbs that don't yet exist. You walk with the peculiar weight of a long night behind you, not quite tired, not quite awake. You've seen every kind of meal this city offers: spicy sausages, fried fish, lentil stew, midnight mystery pies. Now you drift toward one last stop, not from hunger, but from symmetry. Because at the morning market, it all begins again. Vendors unpack carts, stretch aching limbs, shout greetings that sound more like challenges than hellos. Produce stacks in pyramids. Fishmongers slap silver catch onto wet boards, scales glinting. Bakers roll out carts of loaves still hot from ovens you left hours ago. Smoke curls. Metal clang. A man argues about radish prices with the energy of a general at war. But what catches your eye isn't the chaos, it's the rhythm. This is the city's breakfast table, not our modern version. No omelets or orange juice, but raw, immediate fuel before work begins. These meals aren't for leisure. They're tactical, strategic, fast. You watch a cooper eat a boiled egg and onion, alternating bites as he walks. A servant girl chews dried apple slices between sips of weak ale, leading a goat that clearly resents its existence. An apprentice dips rye bread into a vendor's broth bucket and keeps walking, wiping his mouth on his sleeve like he's on divine mission. You buy porridge barley, oats, dried plums, honey ladled into a shallow bowl. Steam rises like a gentle slap. It's thick, hearty, chewy, comforting. Nothing flashy. But this is food that armors your gut for a day of hauling bricks or sewing until your fingers blister. Morning fast food comes without flaring clay bowls, wrapped in bread, cupped in palms. It's ale instead of coffee, eggs with ash still on them. Bread that scratches going down, but it's quick, cheap, filling, reliable. You notice how many eat while moving, trenches tucked under arms, cheese wedged in belts, mugs dangling from hooks. The city doesn't slow for meals. It demands they keep up. Surprises abound. A stall sells warm goat milk spiced with coriander and honey anucho, but the line is steady. Another grills flatbread smeared with garlic paste and greens-less breakfast. More don't tell my priest. You get one. Pungent, oily, incredible. Your breath may suffer, but your soul feels nourished. A woman sells miniature egg pies baked in repurposed oyster shells. Leeks, herbs, a whisper of cheese. She hands you one with a wink. Just barely warm, bursting with savory confidence. Nearby boys scatter after snatching handfuls of roasted chickpeas from a vendor's pan. He rolls his eyes. Seen it before. We'll see it again in some towns. Morning vendors were banned from certain streets to avoid early trash and rats. But breakfast, like rats, always finds a way. Scholars argue medieval breakfast was more common than elite records suggest. Workers, travelers, laborers, they ate in the mornings, not feasts. Fuel.you, finish your flatbread. The market hits full stride. Sunlight clears the rooftops. The night is gone. The vendors you visited hours ago are home, asleep, or washing dishes. Night markets pack embers. Cook shops wipe benches. Monks ring morning bells. Bakers' fires cool. Moon pies are now just rumors on breaths that smell of smoked sausage and sage. But here, in the morning market, medieval fast food lives Unin, full voice, on your way out. A boy offers dried fruit and toasted oats from a cloth sack. A penny, a handful. You take two, chewy, crunchy, smoky, exactly what you didn't know you wanted. The city is fully awake, but you've eaten your way through its hours, wandered through time with grease on your sleeves and stories in your belly. The flavors will fade, but the memory won't. You've tasted a full day of medieval fast food and, somehow, you're still standing, dusk to dawn, bite to bowl. From boiling monk stews to midnight moon pies, your tunic's a mess. Your breath reeks of garlic and smoke. Your boots bear a gravy smear, but there's warmth in your chestnut from fire. Not from fat but from having seen the heartbeat of a medieval city, and it beat through its food, not the royal feasts. Not the castle banquets with roasted swan and gold-dusted pears. This was the other story, the fast, the cheap, the smoky, the spilled. Food for people who worked, prayed, wandered, people who sold their wares, or their time, or both. People without kitchens. People who cooked because not cooking meant not eating. The pie women, the alley bakers, the monks with mortar and pestle, the men grilling goat lungs in barrels at midnight, the children selling eggs, the girls pouring ale thinner than rainwater. And it wasn't just food. It was everything that came with it. The rules, the risks, the sacred fasts, the whispered cheats, the ingenuity of turning scraps into satisfaction, the soft hum of prayer in a cookshop, vinegar's desperate attempt to scare off death, and the quiet, holy moment of someone handing you a bowl without asking who you were. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't clean. It definitely wasn't vegan, but it was real, human, fast, in all the ways that mattered. So now, wherever you are, a soft bed or creaky chair, with modern snacks at arm's reach, or dinner waiting in the kitchen, breathe out deep. Let the world slow. Let the stories settle in your bones, because, for one night, you traveled back. You ate your way across centuries, and you'll never look at a meat pie the same way again.